Just a little reminder of where we've been, and I appreciate everybody being here again tonight. 3 weeks ago, we talked about just the idea of praying without ceasing, or walking humbly with God, going canoeing with God, driving in the car with God, whatever worked for you, to just imagine that Jesus is sitting there and you can have a conversation with Jesus like you would if you were sitting there with a physical person in your canoe or on your walk or in your car. I couldn't have Jesus right in the car with me because he'd hear how I talk when people cut me off.
Yeah, too much TMI right there.
That's right. So I don't know how that would work. And then the second week we talked about praying the Bible, a practice sometimes called divine reading, or Lectio Divina is the technical term, where you read a Bible passage and then you drill down into it until you've got some small portion of it, and you use that to shape your prayers for the day. And I think that was maybe a little challenging for a lot of traditional Lutherans. It's not really part of our practice for a lot of us. And then last week we went even further outside of what might be normal for Lutherans, and we talked about meditation. So I appreciate the fact that you all came back. I thought that was 50-50 after last week. That might go, no, that's too much. I don't know what we're doing for, 3 weeks ago we were Lutherans, then we were Catholics, and now we're Buddhists, and that might be the end of this. But meditation really is a Christian practice. And I'm just curious who participated in that or practiced that during the week, and how did it go for you?
As you're describing that last week, it's focusing on a single thought for a lengthy time period. Mm-hmm. I think I do that a lot.
Okay.
Until I'm interrupted.
Right. Okay. Until something comes along and moves you on to the next thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or until suddenly some other thoughts that bother me interrupt me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
The problem occurs.
Okay. So as you were trying that, when something came along to distract you, were you able to get back?
That's where I have to start praying again.
Okay. Yeah.
God, okay, I need help.
Okay.
Start praying. Okay, this is what I need help with.
Okay. Getting back when something distracts you, getting back to what you were doing before.
Then you pray for when something distracts me. Then I got to pray to God to help me refocus.
Okay. All right. Anybody else have feedback based on practice during the week?
Varying degrees first thing in the morning. That's about the only time I can find to realistically put some minutes together and not be interrupted. So What I've found, fortunately for me, is it kind of gets the day off on a better foot. It doesn't kind of start out on a footing of how am I going to possibly get things done and how am I possibly going to have a good day with how many things I've got to deal with. It's more like it'll work out.
There you go. Get started by getting yourself focused well. I once saw a sign that said something to the effect of, it's better to tune your instrument before the symphony starts.
That's a good one.
That's been my experience also.
Yeah. If you start your day with some prayer time, and it doesn't have to be right away, first thing, but if you do it sort of early in the day, I know people whose prayer time is at night, and I kind of wonder, like, if most of my prayer time was mid or late evening, I think it would be, well, thank Jesus I got through that, but if I start earlier in the day, and the earlier in the day, the better, it's a way of focusing the day. So I,
Almost kind of need both.
yeah,
It's kind of sort of like an essay
Yeah.
or life,
okay, yeah,
the introduction and the conclusion, the reflection.
yep, and then all the stuff that happened in the middle, right?
Yeah, the in between, sometimes you need to keep praying in between, help, help,
Right,
or yay, thank you.
all right, very good, all right, thanks.
I did it at night,
Okay,
and I use the Jesus prayer. And I'm usually a pretty good arbiter of time. So I set the half an hour. I didn't set a stopwatch or anything. I just, I can usually kind of tell. And surprisingly, I checked, when I finally checked the clock, I was 3 minutes over.
Wow.
So it's like, okay, that was interesting. That's the thinking side of things. As far as, I did find myself several times kind of wandering off, like you said, even though it was fairly quiet. And so I can't say that there were any big revelations or wow, this was amazing, or this was pointless. It was just kind of middle of the road.
Okay.
On it.
Okay.
But it did. I say, it did strike me as interesting that the time actually was longer than what I thought. Okay, I figured I was probably around 28 minutes or so, and I was 5 minutes later. So like, okay, that's.
Okay, so you relaxed pretty well during that time?
I would say yes.
Okay.
And like I say, would try to stay on task, and usually, but then something would pop in. And it's like.
Where did that come from?
That one, no, it was more focused, or on point, I guess, but.
Yeah, and sometimes stuff will just kind of bubble up that's in your subconscious, and you kind of got to deal with it, and if that happens, that's okay, because that's what came up. Sometimes it's just simply a distraction.
Yeah, I don't want to say it was always a distraction, but it was something that was, off the focal point.
Got it.
Of the
Okay.
meditation.
All right, so tonight we're going to talk about something that's probably more traditional for people from the Lutheran tradition. We're going to talk about the Lord's Prayer. If you went to a confirmation class when you were a kid, you probably learned something about the Lord's Prayer. And I'm not going to repeat that by making you memorize Luther's small catechism.
This is most certainly true.
Yes, it is. This is most certainly true. We're not going to do that, but we are going to start by reading from Matthew chapter 6, beginning at verse 7, and then read down to verse 13. And then we have some discussion questions we'll do. Matthew chapter 6, beginning at verse 7 down to 13. And I'd love to hear it a couple times from different folks. So somebody read that for us?
Sorry, repeat the book and chapter again. Matthew 6.
Matthew 6, verses 7 through 13.
Well, I could read.
Great.
I can go next after.
Okay. In praying, do not heap up empty phrases as the Gentiles do, for they think that they will be heard for their many words. Do not be like them, for your Father knows what you need before you ask him. Pray then like this. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we also have forgiven our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. And up to 13, right?
Oh, yes, all right, thank you, Kathy. Chris, were you going to read that for us?
Yeah,
too?
sure. And
right.
thanks, Jeff. You actually have the same screen up I do. And when you pray, do not keep on babbling like pagans, for they think they will be heard because of their many words. Do not be like them, for your Father knows what you need before you ask him. This then is how you should pray. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we have forgiven our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one.
All right, thanks. So we have some discussion questions. How did you learn how to pray? How did you, when you were starting to pray, how did you learn?
Mom and Dad.
Mom and dad, okay,
Sunday school, I had Sunday school as well.
okay,
Your dad, Sunday
Church.
school, church.
okay. All right. I remember, and I might have talked about this before, but I remember, being told to close my eyes when I pray. And I think that was in Sunday school, and it was so you wouldn't be looking around the room when you were at the other kids while you were praying. I had a professor in seminary who asked if I thought that God was on the inside of my eyelids and I could see God better if I closed my eyes. Or is God in the people in the room with you, and can you actually see God better if your eyes are open? I thought that was a good question. I don't really care if you open your eyes or close your eyes or not, but that made me think about that question. It's like, well, so did I learn to close my eyes because you actually pray better that way, or just because kids are so easily distracted?
It's good.
As and adults, it's probably, it's one way to
Goes-
shut out, it's one way to shut out another input, I guess, while you're
Yep.
praying, it's the concentration, so. Yeah, not required, but maybe sometimes helpful.
Yeah,
I don't believe it's a doctrinal thing, is it?
I don't think so,
That I'm aware
no.
of. I mean, I could be wrong.
Remember
but I
seeing
don't-
that in heaven.
Yeah, yeah, so,
I picture Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, not with his eyes closed. Maybe just, the language that he used there, and he's saying, Father.
yeah,
It seems like a conversation. It seems,
Yeah.
it doesn't seem like my head is down and maybe, but it's passionate, right?
Right.
It's funny.
Your hands, bow your head.
Well, it's funny thinking about that, because like when my students, I have them all pray, in the morning, we trade off who prays, and I keep my eyes open, looking around, making sure everyone's heads are bowed, and I feel like I'm not really praying because I'm watching them. And like, if my eyes are open, I feel like I'm not, like, I don't know, it feels like wrong, but it's, I guess you don't have to have them closed. I have to watch them to make sure nobody's goofing off when my eyes are closed, but.
that's funny, yeah. So the Lord's Prayer is is a memorized prayer. I find in almost any situation, if somebody starts praying the Lord's Prayer, other people will join in. And maybe not everybody knows it in the same translation, right? But we all kind of get to the end at about the same time,
You say it's a memorized prayer. I don't know that God said memorize this.
No,
He just said pray like this.
yes, yeah. and-
We've kind of made it a memorized prayer.
Yes,
but
yeah, we've done that. We've made it part of the ritual.
I think he was maybe giving a framework.
Yeah.
And he's probably saying, make it short. Just
Yeah.
I already know your needs, so don't go into the
Yeah,
nits.
yeah,
Maybe you're gonna get to that, but.
yeah,
Don't go into
yeah.
the
You're about
nits.
5 minutes ahead of me, but yes, I think you're right. So do you have other prayers that you've memorized, that you've used, like table prayers or morning prayers or bedtime prayers?
Table prayer, bedtime prayer.
Now I lay me down to sleep.
That one.
Yeah.
Yep.
That one?
Or God is great, God is good. Thank him for little prayers like that as a kid.
Mostly, I'd say meal-based prayers.
Yeah.
Well, one, oh, here, this would be, do you know this one? Our hands we fold, our heads we bow. For food and drink, we thank thee now. For Jesus' sake, amen.
Oh, I didn't know that one.
Very Midwestern. That's what I learned. I learned it. Have you heard that, Chris? Did you know that one? Oh, okay. Yeah, I've never run into anyone else that,
Yeah. Nat
that used
Campbell.
There's a simple rub-a-dub-dub, thanks for the grub.
Yeah, and then if you're really excited, you got yay, God at the end of that, yes. All right. Yes.
as well.
My grandma used to say, "Oh, give thanks to the Lord, for he is good."
Okay, I like that, yeah.
So my dad, when I pray with my dad, it's always common table prayer and that one that falls.
Okay, those are,
Double, it's always a double.
they're very good, all right. All right, so what sort of a challenge do you have in your prayer life? What's a challenge for you personally about praying?
Well, if you say the same thing, it can get stale, but at the same time, hard to top what you have used for, in my case, 42 years, and it's worked well, and it still has meaning, but trying to find a way to keep it fresh and in the now.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's an issue for a lot of people. What other issues do we face?
It sounds bad, but for me, just like remembering to take time to do it.
Oh,
I always mean to.
oh, no, that's not bad at all. That's reality.
Just taking the time.
Right. And that's one of the reasons that I recommend setting a time, you know, and for me, it's not always first thing when I get up, but it's got to be before I leave the house. You know, there was one point in my life at which I was getting into the office early, and the first thing that I did was I closed my door. And then I had my prayer time. And then I opened the door when the office technically opened. But you've got to have some time that you set aside.
Yeah.
Even if it's like, you know, for you, in the car on the way to work.
Yeah.
Yeah, just don't pray with your eyes closed.
No.
That situation is not good.
Right.
Unless you're in park.
Your eyes aren't closed,
Yeah.
but you don't know that you're praying.
In park.
Yeah. I mean, technically, I pray every morning with my students, but I don't think that.
Yeah.
That's more for them.
Okay, so is there a line in the Lord's Prayer that really gets your attention and really strikes home for you lately?
On earth as it is in heaven.
On earth as it is in heaven, okay? Okay, what about that gets to you?
Finding the good in people, or being the good in the world,
Okay,
which I mentioned in one of our earlier weeks. I keep coming back to that.
yeah, okay. Being the good in the world, doing something to live that out,
Yeah.
okay? Anybody else have a piece that's like getting your attention right now?
Yeah, like, I guess it depends on the translation, but yeah, I always read as forgive us our trespasses, we forgive those, so it's like forgiveness, you know, remembering to.
Okay,
Yeah, that's a
Forgive
second.
people.
okay. Is there anything that God's actually put on your heart to pray about recently? Something that that you just felt, like last Sunday, Pastor Bob was talking about, like getting a tap on the shoulder. Has there been anything that God's been tapping you on the shoulder about and saying, well, pay attention to this? Pay attention to this in your prayer life.
For me, it's been about folks who I haven't thought about that need prayer. There's been both some people who are not well and others who are just not happy, you know, to sort of, again, they come to your mind and you don't know why am I
right.
thinking about you? I haven't seen you in a long time, but yet my heart is moved to reach out. I'd reached out to some, but I thought praying for them is probably the easiest and best thing I could begin doing.
Okay, all right.
For me, there's two families that actually, in this church, that are close friends, and they both lost either their father or father-in-law. Actually, they're both married, so it would be father and father-in-law.
Gosh, yeah.
Yeah, that were very, so I know that's something that
Yeah.
has been on our mind a lot.
Yeah, somebody in the 4 o'clock group said something that was really interesting. He said, everybody is so focused on Afghanistan right now, for good reason. I suppose it's actually Afghanistan, which I've only learned in the last month, right, At least I know where it is on a map now. But everybody's been so focused on Afghanistan that he's like, well, there are other places in the world where people have problems. So he sort of made a list of those places. And he thought about, Haiti, for example, or Uganda.
Louisiana, yeah, there's all.
Yeah, Louisiana. I don't remember if he mentioned Ethiopia, but Ethiopia would be another place. And he's been including those places in his prayers. Sort of felt, and it's not like it wouldn't be good to have one more person praying for Afghanistan, but it's like, well, so it felt important to him to recognize these other places in his prayer life. I thought that was interesting.
Can't forget to keep aware of our next door neighbors too. We can look around at faraway places, but in the meantime, don't forget about praying for your
Right
right next to you.
Right. You might bump into, yes.
Right.
Yeah, right.
One time as I felt I was praying better than I am now, I was pretty good about either folding a sheet into eighths, and I would write down things, especially if I was thinking I'll pray for you, or I tell someone I'll pray for you, I feel an obligation to think that through. And then I found an app also on your phone, like Echo, and you can just sort of make a note of it. And then when it's time to pray, you just touch it, and it just sort of says, here's one, and you can just sort of kind of step through them just as a reminder, because it's, it helps you just kind of think of and you said, maybe thinking broadly, I prayed for this, maybe I should extend that.
Yeah.
To my neighbors or others.
Yeah. And, you could do that the old fashioned way and take a note card and a pen and, put the note card in your pocket. That's probably what I'd have to do. I make notes on my phone. And then I don't look at the notes on my phone. So
Sometimes just the act of writing the note is enough.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
maybe not.
yeah, it can be. So we're not going to read Luke 11 tonight, but I'd encourage you just to look at it at some point, because the context is a little bit different. In Matthew chapter 6, Jesus is teaching about prayer in this way in the middle of a fairly lengthy sermon. In Luke chapter 11, the disciples ask Jesus to teach them how to pray. And they're seeing in some way or another what his prayer life is like. And they're like, well, that looks better than what I'm doing. So teach us how to do this. And you might think that they would have expected a long, complicated set of directions, right? Or, a 4-week class on how to pray. He gives them a few lines, and he says, when you pray like this. He doesn't, you're right, he doesn't say memorize this prayer, but he says pray like this. And it's 6 simple petitions as it is in Matthew. It's even shorter in Luke. But the Matthew version is closer to the way we say it in church. So we're gonna stay with that one so people don't get more confused. Because I find if we talk about the Lord's Prayer using the Luke version, people are like, what happened to the rest of it? Well, the rest of it's in a different book, right? So let's read Matthew chapter 6, just verses 9 through 13 again. And then we're going to go through those phrases. And if we could hear that in, I don't know, does anybody have a translation we haven't heard yet in front of you?
I have the New Revised Standard Version, which was different than the NIV.
Okay,
I'm not sure which
That'll
was
work.
the first version we had. Let's pray
That'll
then
work.
in this way. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we also have forgiven our debtors. And do not bring us to the time of trial, but rescue us from the evil one.
all right, thanks, Chris. So we have just a few simple phrases. It goes pretty quick. And Jeff, you were right, it's pretty short. That might sort of be a model for prayer. If we used the Revised Common Lectionary here, which we don't, a lot of Lutheran churches do, there's actually a book that's put out every year with suggested prayers to use on a given Sunday that have something to do with what the lessons are. And one of them is usually a list of 6 short petitions, sort of following the model of the Lord's Prayer. And then there's the spot where you can add more petitions here if you want, and because pastors are long-winded, we add more prayers. We think it has to be longer than Jesus told his disciples what to do. But, and maybe, and I say that only half jokingly, but it might be that there just really are things going on that you think the congregation needs to pray about. But maybe you can get it down to 6 petitions. When I was in a setting where we used that model, if I added something where it said you could add more petitions here, I would make it shorter someplace else. Because people already heard a sermon, right? We don't need to make the prayers into one too. So let's go through these six phrases. And we've talked about Christianity being sets of relationships, a relationship up to God, a relationship into your Christian community, and a relationship out to people who aren't part of your community, or more broadly thinking, just people who don't know Jesus yet. And let's look at these, asking ourselves, which of these relationships does this petition have to do with? And the answer for some of them isn't clear, so that this isn't a quiz. There aren't necessarily right answers or wrong answers. It's really intended to be discussion. I always like to point that out because people are afraid to give the wrong answer, right? Right? Like, I don't want to be wrong. Okay, so, our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Is that up, in, or out? That's up. We all think that's up. Okay.
With some in.
Some in. Okay. Tell us about that. Is the rest of us all immediately jumped to up? Tell us about in.
Well, I think it has to do with how you hold God in your relationship. So you have to look into
Father.
how you want to maintain that relationship. Hallowed be your name has to do with how you respect God and what you do to maintain that.
Okay.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
I like that. Just call him our Father is sort of a in.
Yeah. Yeah. The word our on some level is including your larger community, and that'll show up again and again and again throughout these petitions. So you're right. There's some in there just because the relationship it's not just personal. American Christianity has this real relationship on my personal relationship with Jesus. Well, it's also our relationship with Jesus, or our relationship with God the Father. So it's our Father in heaven. So in Aramaic, there's an Aramaic word, Abba, which shows up sometimes in the New Testament, although most of the New Testament is written in Greek. There's some Aramaic words in there. And Aramaic word Abba is sometimes translated as daddy. It's certainly more familiar than father. And I think, for example, about, being as formal as calling somebody sir. I always get confused when people call me sir, and I think maybe they just think I'm old. It's like, am I so old? That's what you have to call me, really? Because I thought when I was growing up, sir was either my grandfather or somebody in uniform. So am I old enough that now I'm reminding you of your grandfather, and then you're going to call me sir, right? But that's that more formal, like sort of like father. And dad or daddy is more informal. Is it hard for you to think about calling God dad or daddy or Abba as opposed to father or Lord?
It's less natural, I would say.
You just get used to calling him father.
Mm-hmm.
And wouldn't bother me to think of him as a daddy. That's just, think of him as a daddy, but used to calling him father.
Okay, got it, yeah.
It has a lot to do with kind of the respect that you feel like you owe, I suppose if, it has to do with knowing, I suppose. Yeah, so it does have to do with the relationship too, because even famous people or people who are highly respected have children, they don't call them, by their title, they call them by dad. So.
Yeah.
So in the Greek, did they put the Aramaic in there? What did Jesus?
Yeah, there are.
Did he use father or did he use the Abba?
Yeah, and I don't remember what it is in this particular passage, but there are places, and if I had been more on top of it today, I would have actually checked that. But there are places in the Gospels where Abba is used. And I don't recall if it's actually here or not, although I think so. I think so. I'm right now just looking to see if there's a note that tells us in the bottom of my page.
Because in Matthew and in Luke, it's both translated as father.
Yeah.
But so at least the similarities between the two versions are very consistent in that respect.
Yeah, and there's not a note here, so I don't.
Yeah, I didn't have any
Remember.
notes in
Yeah.
either, whether it was.
But there is that relational aspect that using the less formal language might feel more relational. Sort of like using personal pronouns makes your relationship with God feel more personal than if you just use titles or descriptions. There's all sorts of language in the Old Testament that has names or descriptions for God that doesn't sound personal. But using a word he, for example, makes that more personal than using a title like, for example, Psalm I was reading this morning referred to Lord God Almighty, right? If you said Lord God Almighty instead of he, that sounds much more imposing and does not sound relational. So I wanted to delve into that relationship issue a little bit. Then we have what I think was Chris's favorite, your kingdom come, your will be done. Is this up, in, or out for you? What do you think?
I feel like it's in and out.
It's in and out? Okay. How do you get to both of those.
Your will be done. So if you're doing it with like the Christian community, we're doing as God says.
Okay,
But then also we can relate to those who don't know Jesus yet. It could be, we're showing them,
okay,
like when you go and talk about him.
okay, cool. All right, anybody else have a different take on that?
I see it as all three, honestly, because I think coming, right, as it is in heaven reminds me that it's coming from or is
Okay.
in heaven. And then I think to the best point, the in and out sort of seem like extensions of that, like where it goes, the flow.
Okay, all right, cool, thank you. So, at least if we take the Christmas carol seriously, light and life for all he brings, risen with healing in his wings, God's kingdom is a kingdom of light and love. Is there an area in which you feel like there's darkness and hate, where you would like to see that infiltrated or defeated by light and love? And that could be in your life or on some larger scale.
Are you just speaking generally or in relation to a verse here?
Well,
I kind of lost you.
okay. Well, the idea here is God's kingdom could be described in terms of being about light and love.
Okay.
And then the opposition to light and love would be darkness or hate. Is there an area of darkness and hate, either in your experience as you're living now, or in some broader area of the world, where you'd like to see God's kingdom of light and love overtaking it?
Which is the extension of your kingdom come, your will be done. You're saying,
Yes.
where would that spread?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, what would that look like? I think it was Martin Luther King who said, I'll paraphrase, hate can't conquer hate, but love can conquer hate. Where do we need, either in your life or in the world, would you say we need some more love?
Anywhere that vaccinations are discussed and getting back to some semblance of normal and being on the same page. I don't know how Extron, where I work, is going to, this year for sure, but even next year, who knows, pitch it for people to come back into the office, and whether they'll put a flag in the sand that basically if you don't get vaccinated, you're not welcome back, or if you aren't, you just have to continue to wear a mask, and how are they going to police it? There's a lot of disgust and a lot of apathy that I see within the company, and at every company, not unique to Extron, but basically how do we get back to working as a team in person, not just remotely disparate and calling Zoom meetings and Teams meetings when we get around to it? How do we get back to working together or building each other up? There's things that are missed by not being in person and playing off of each other, improvising on ways to solve problems, trying to get a hold of someone on the phone in a cold, impersonal way. A lot of the warmth of working together on the same team has disappeared, and I wonder how quickly we can get it back.
Okay, and I'm sensing some frustration that not everybody is on the same team about how you get back or what the importance is of getting back.
Not even close.
Okay, all right.
Worlds apart.
Yep.
And not everybody is eager to work towards a solution. It's my way or the highway for a lot of things I've seen. And I'm also seeing multiple coworkers thoroughly pissed at the state of California. And at one point you think to yourself, love it or leave it. You've chosen to be here, but at the same time, that doesn't solve anything.
Right.
And
Okay.
that's getting back to Martin Luther King. He doesn't
Okay.
conquer anything.
Okay, all right. Anything else about that kingdom? All right, we'll turn the page over. Give us today our daily bread. Is that up, in, or out? What do you think?
I'd say it's in.
I was going out or up.
Okay, so we've got up, in, and out. All right.
So we got all the bases covered.
Narrows it down.
All right, all right.
Not down, not down.
All right, so how was, so how is that up?
Because it's like we're relying on him. And
Okay.
so you need to have, I mean, we always rely on him no matter how strong your relationship is at that moment, but you know, I mean, we fully rely on him. And I think if you're in or up to your relationship with God and it's good, you realize kind of how much you need
Okay,
him in everything.
okay, so in that sense, for you, this is about depending on God. Okay? All right, so what about in? How is this in?
Well, daily bread doesn't just have to refer to being fed in a culinary sense. It can talk about charging your batteries and being fed spiritually. I kind of interpret that as an all-encompassing line, not just keep me alive by food, but keep me fed in the spirit so I can continue being a human being.
Okay, all right, and then we had out. We hit them all on, well, we hit them all on this one. How was this one out?
Well, it's us.
Yeah.
I guess in some sense, you could say that it's, in Texas, it's all y'all.
Okay, okay, all right, or in Joyce, it's yous guys?
You guys.
Okay. Okay, all right, good.
Plural pronoun.
It's y'all, but it's really all y'all.
Yeah, but all y'all.
All right, so this reminds us that God provides for us daily. And how have you seen that in your life? How has that happened for you, that you've seen God providing for you?
It's kind of hard to explain, but problems you think are insurmountable work themselves out. People work with you to come to a conclusion that works for everyone. And eventually, after de-escalating, it's not always as crazy as people make it out to be. We can get there together where we want to work with you and we want to have a relationship with you. I'm speaking in the sense of what I'm doing when I go out and help people. Sometimes it's the sky is falling and the end of days is here. Your system sucks. Take it all out. Go away. And it's not anything like that after a while. So just kind of having a calm head and saying we're here as long as it takes to do the right thing.
Okay, so so you're seeing that then as God being in the process.
Yeah, and
Okay.
keeping everyone from getting overwhelmed and caught up in emotion and things that don't help.
Okay, all right. All right, anything else on that? How have you seen God providing?
Well, I know for me, like I just kind of see it in too with like his timing of things. Like I was given the opportunity to have the job that I have now last November. And before that, I was being an aide at the school, and I was like really frustrated because I have my master's, I have my credential, and I'm an aide. And at the time though too, when school started, I was dealing with like, I'm fine now, but a lot of like weird health issues where we didn't know what the heck was going on. Literally a week after I was cleared and said like, we know what's going on and we know how to, work with it, I was offered my current position.
Wow.
Okay.
So I think it was it was a lot of lessons in one of like, you're in control, not me, your timing. And then you provided, like, at the time, had I gotten that job in the beginning of the school year, I would have had to take off a lot of time because I was doing a lot of blood work. I had to do like a full steroid treatment that like knocked me out for a week. I had to do like all this stuff that was fine to do as an aide because I was working half day. But if I was full-time teacher trying to do all this, I wouldn't have been able to do it.
Wow,
I
yeah,
would have either had to put off the steroid treatment I did or take off a bunch of time at work right in the beginning of the school year. So all that was dealt with, and then I was given the job. So that was him providing for me, like, we're gonna deal with all this,
okay.
and then you'll get, you know, what you've worked for. So that's kind of how I've seen it.
Yeah, sometimes there's actually a concept in Mark's gospel, for example. Mark says, or Jesus says, you know, the time is now, and that word time is not, it's not chronological time. It's this is God's timing for a change in your life. And I don't know about you, but I sometimes get frustrated with God's timing, and I want my timing, right? Right? You know, I want my solution on my schedule.
This is my plan.
Yeah, right. You're right.
Yeah.
And usually, you know, it always eventually works out. Maybe not the way that I wanted it to. That great theologian Garth Brooks with his song "Unanswered Prayers." You know, so the solution that you have in mind and the time frame that you have for it, okay, that's not what's going to happen. But there will be a time when the time is now.
How do you know when the time is, when God's time is versus your time?
Well, we always want God's time and our time frame to be the same, and they just aren't always, right? And that's a challenge. That's a challenge, and sometimes it's hard to recognize, especially if the answer isn't the answer that you wanted either.
Yeah, it's like, how do you know? Maybe somebody else isn't getting their shoulder tap.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Answering.
Right, yeah,
Somebody else isn't answering God's shoulder tap.
yeah.
That's where you
Going off your
wonder.
time. Yeah.
And that's always possible. You know, we live in a world of, I'm going to use a highly technical term, messed up people.
Yeah,
Yeah, right. And how do we know somebody else isn't messing with this, right?
yeah.
Yeah,
It was supposed to be God's time, but somebody didn't answer God's shoulder tap.
yeah.
So does God stop then? Does God stop, or does he find another shoulder?
Find another shoulder for another
No,
shoulder tap.
I'm
Yeah.
asking, does God find another shoulder?
I guess so.
Hope so.
You just have to keep being patient, I suppose.
Be very trusting.
Yeah, just,
That gets
you just get
frustrating.
frustrated on
Yeah,
the way. Okay,
sure.
God, give him another shoulder tap.
And hurry, would you please? Yeah.
Use 2 fingers this time.
Kick him in the behind.
Right, that's right. Move this along, would you? Yes.
Yeah.
Right. So, forgive us our trespasses, we could say debts, as we forgive those who trespass against us. How's that? Is that up, in, or out?
Yes.
Yes, okay. All right.
No, I think it continues that relationship, although there's a very personal side of this too. But then there's all, as far as forgiving my debts, but then the out is forgiveness of our debtors.
Yeah,
And
yeah. So,
I think might be the harder thing.
yeah. So what's the hardest thing about forgiving another person?
Well, you don't always, in some capacity, feel they deserve it.
Right.
There's an eye for an eye element to thinking sometimes that's hard to get past. You want your pound of flesh.
You're not sorry for what they did.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and sometimes you can wait for somebody to apologize to you. And you might wait a long time. And then I think the question becomes, are you going to walk around angry at them until they come to you and apologize? Or are you going to let that anger go? There are a bunch of things that have been a bunch of analogies that have been used to describe that, like staying angry at somebody and then living with that anger. This might be my favorite description right now, but has been described as drinking poison and expecting the other person to get sick. Because the anger's hard on you. If you're angry about something, that anger is getting in the way of you living a better life. So that can be really frustrating.
Also, Jesus doesn't say, wait till the other guy is repentant.
Right.
Turn the other cheek.
Yeah. And that eye for an eye thing, people tend not to realize that was intended as a limitation. It's not required retribution. It's if somebody accidentally kills your ox, that's not reason to kill them, right? Now, yeah, they should probably buy you a new ox. Right. But it's not that they deserve to die because they accidentally killed your ox. That's so it's that responses have to be proportional. We had Joseph in the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. There's a story in Genesis where there's a guy from a nearby village who rapes one of Jacob's daughters, and the brothers respond by going and killing all of the men in the village. Yes, their sister getting raped was horrible. Was the correct response to kill every man from that village? That was overkill. That was more than an eye for an eye. So the eye for an eye is a limit. It's don't do more than this. It's not this is how you have to exact revenge or retribution. I've spoken with a lot of people who've said, well, how do I forgive this person, or how do I learn to get along with them? And, because this is what our history is, or this is how they treat me. And I've almost always in those situations recommended just start by praying for that person. Because it's hard to stay mad at somebody you're praying for. Unless, in the words of the country song that was popular a few years ago, unless you're praying that their brakes go out while they're driving down the hill, that would be don't do that, right? But pray for them, and it will be hard to stay mad at them.
Yeah.
It might take a while, depending on how mad you are, but if you're actually praying for their well-being, eventually that's going to help you work the anger out.
Sometimes you have to pray at a distance, though.
Yes.
Because you can only turn the cheek so many times.
Yeah. And, for forgiving, the Bible tells us that God not only forgives, God forgets. Sometimes it's not safe for us to forget, depending on what they did to you. Because depending on what they did, you do have to live your life in a way that makes it unlikely they're ever going to get the chance to do it again. but that doesn't mean you have to walk around angry. So, and that's a fine line, but it's important not to walk around with the anger, because the anger ends up hurting you. So then we have another one of my favorite lines: lead us not into temptation, sometimes translated as save us from the time of trial. There was a country song from the early 90s, I think, that had the line in it, lead me not into temptation, I can get there by myself.
Sounds more country than Western.
Yes. Yes. So how does, okay, so does lead us not into temptation or save us from the time of trial, which are both good translations. Is that up, in, or out? What do you think?
That's up. Although it has some in, of course.
Okay. Okay, up and in. Okay. What do you think? Any other? Okay, we've got up and in. Anybody want it to be out?
Could be out. I guess that's where the temptation lies, but.
Are the-
The words that are striking are the lead us part,
Mm-hmm.
or lead us not, I guess is the.
Yeah.
is the-
Let me ask you this, are those two versions you reference equivalent? The two different translations, 'cause those were all, what you listed were also footnotes in mine as different, as what we, in the Lutheran Book of Worship, it's, and lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. And the, do not bring us to the time of trial, to me, that my mind is going to a time of judgment. Those seem like two entirely different
Yeah, or,
things.
yeah, or do we think of trial like as testing?
Yeah, suffering.
Yeah, don't take me to a time, don't let me go into a time of suffering or a time of having my faith tried, for example, from which I might not, I may not prevail in this test.
Do you think God would allow that? Something beyond what you could handle?
Okay,
Maybe I'm
Yeah.
off subject.
Yeah,
Off topic.
yeah, I think that's a good question, and there are some people who will say, well, God will never let you have more than you can handle.
Heard that.
And I hear that a lot. I'm not sure that's biblical,
Okay.
but I'm pretty sure that when you've got more than you can handle, God will help you handle it, which is different. And I realize how you read that how you read that probably depends on what translation you're reading when you look at the relevant passages, because there are some translations which would give you the impression that, oh, well, yes, God won't give you more than you can handle. And I don't know, I've had more than I could handle. I don't know how many times, you know.
I've certainly gone the wrong way on a number of occasions.
Well, yeah, and when you're at the point where the only thing you can do is cry out to God for help, at that moment, did you have more than you can handle? You just might have, So a couple weeks ago, I suggested reading a psalm every morning. The most common form of the Psalms is the Lament, which is David crying out, God help me. God help me, I've got more than I can handle right now. And at least in most of them, by the time you get to the Psalm, although there's no evidence that anything changed other than David's faith, David's faith in God has been renewed, and David is praising God for now David having the faith that God's going to get him through this. So will God ever let you have more than you can handle? I think yes. Will God be with you when it's more than you can handle on your own? The answer to that is clearly yes. But that was a good question, because we sometimes talk about it the other way.
Sometimes steps in and takes over.
Yeah. Yeah. So then we end with, but deliver us from evil, or that could also be translated literally as deliver us from, or save us from the evil one. Again, is that up, in, or out, do you think?
I can only think of up right now.
Okay, that's asking God to do something particularly for, even though it's us, so you could argue it's in, that feels like I'm asking God to do something very specifically for me.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. But you could be doing that for, your entire worshiping community or a group that you're in. So it could be in, but there's also very definitely an up. And we're calling on God there to intervene on our behalf, just like in lead us not into temptation gets into, will God let you have more than you can handle, or save us from the time of trial, will God let you have more than you can handle? No, deliver us when we're in over our heads, deliver us, save us. So I see it's now after 8, and I was gonna try to have us done by about 8. So so now I'm gonna try to land this plane.
Okay.
Oh, we'll
On approach.
That's right. We'll see how this goes. So this is, as Jeff talked about 5 minutes ahead of me. Okay. This is a model for a short prayer. I'm a believer that spending half an hour in prayer, some of that time in silence can be really good for your faith life. Can also be good for your health, for that matter. But a short prayer with 5 or 6 phrases that starts with thanking God for who God is, asking that God's will is going to be done in your life, and then making a few slightly more specific prayers for something that's on your heart. That's a really good model for prayer. That's what Jesus says, when you pray like this. So it's hard to beat Jesus' model, right? So that's a different way that we can think about prayer. So over the next week or so, just a few questions to ponder. You can spend some time thinking about which of these phrases really resonates with you. You could, if you wanted, choose a particular phrase to focus on this week, and then see about how focusing on that phrase in your prayer life would impact your week, the way your life goes. And then you might spend some time thinking about what would remind you to pray either the Lord's Prayer or some prayer based on that model at multiple times during the day, and try incorporating that into your life. And I know I've given you sort of 4 completely different ideas in a week and said, try this. So if something that you've already tried is really working for you, I'm gonna make this my practice. Okay, don't interrupt that with this. If you're like, oh, this is the thing I'm gonna do. But if you're still in that sort of experimenting and trying different things, try this at some for all or a portion of this week and just see how it goes. I don't think you have to have one practice. I think it's not good to do something completely different every day. I mean, part of what makes it a practice is that, you get better at it when you do what?
Repeat it.
Repeat it, yes. You get better at it when you practice it, right? But you can also experiment with this as another option. And again, I want to thank everybody for hanging with me. I know we've covered a lot of ground in 4 weeks. And 1 week you might have said, well, hold on, we're not Catholics. The next week you might have said, hey, wait a minute, we're not Buddhists, So I really appreciate everybody hanging with this and being willing to look at these different practices. I'm hoping Jeff will get this up sometime. Let me know when you've got this up online, and then I'll make sure that the description, et cetera, is good.
Okay.
And then we've had a recording of some kind every week. If you've participated by recording, whether it's been Zoom or whether you've watched it on YouTube, I'd like feedback on how that worked, and then feedback on how this worked. What was great? What wasn't great? What would have made it better? Because I want everything to be a learning experience, including for me. I've taught material on prayer before, but I've never taught it the way I'm teaching it now, the way I've taught it the last month. So I'd like feedback on whether this worked for you, and if so, why, and if, and what could have made it better. So I would appreciate that. And for now, let's close with prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank and praise you for who you are, for you are holy. Do your will in our lives and help us to live lives that honor you and serve your kingdom. Thank you for providing our needs. Help us to love others as you love us, and forgive us when we fail. We pray this in the mighty name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen.